What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's the Chosen One. Sorry for the wait. I had to take a little break. You know, the family was in town, so I had to, spend some time with them. I also made a recent video about someone trying to take subscribers from my brother, Bro Sanchez. And I hate to, start off the year like that. I'm trying to be, more positive minded going into 2016. Okay, so basically we're about to get into this subject on the history of the N-word. The history of the N-word is very deep and intriguing, to say the least, because for the past 400 plus years, the N-word has been something that has plagued people's minds for the past 400 plus years. Okay, the whole word derived from abbreviation that was known as NGR. Okay, it went from NGA to NGR because the first alphabet in Africa had no vowels, ladies and gentlemen. It was all consonants. Okay, no vowels. So the original name for what was really called Naga or Nagas was NGR or just NG. Okay, so it came from that. And when the European colonialists came to Africa, that's where they created their own word, and that was known as nigger. Going through slavery, 400 years of slavery, it evolved over time into what we call, nigga. That's what it is now. But if you go back pre-slavery, it was Nagas, it was Nagini, and Nega, and that is Ethiopian for king. Nega is Ethiopian for king, and Nagini is Ethiopian and Kemetic for serpent wisdom and serpent king. The actual N word is in direct connection with our Kundalini energy, okay? Because like I said, it means serpent kings. The United States government is trying to portray the N-word as something complete negative, and there's white people trying to ban this word. Like I said, this is really deep, and it basically ties into what we've been saying for the whole time we've been doing this. They flipped what's good, turned it into bad, and what's now bad is good. Like I was saying earlier, this whole N-word theology, okay, started in ancient Ethiopia. And notice what I said. I said the actual word that comes from Nagas, Nagini, Nega, were the people with the serpent wisdom. And that actual name means king, serpent king, which means that the Africans who are now in America are still called Nagas. So that means we are in direct lineage of the people ruling in Africa. Okay, it's really deep when you break down the etymology and the spiritual science behind this, but there's special power in words, people. This word was meant to have positive energy surrounding it, and the Caucasoids in power, the 2% in power, their plan was to flip it around into something we fear, into something we hate to hear, and into something that nobody, wants in their vocabulary. And this is all a scheme and a tactic to block us from tapping into our Kundalini energy. It is very deep. Even the NFL, even the National Football League banned the N-word, people. You can look into this. It's really deep. And, it's crazy because when you look at the NFL is 80% black, 80% African people.
With what you speaking on, my brother, about the NFL, it brings me to a question for you. With 80% of the players being black and they banning the N-word, my question to you, my brother, is we know that 80% of those black players agree with the ban and probably had their part in helping bring the ban forth, because you got to understand that a lot of our people don't like the word as well. So I want you to touch on that. How do we go from bringing it to a negative light into a positive light, and what's the importance of us doing that? Because a lot of our people just say the easiest thing to do would be to just leave the word alone. And we do know that a lot of words and a lot of symbols and everything else that was good is now being used in a bad light, as you said. But I just wanted you to touch on that for 1 minute.
Yeah, that's a perfectly fine question. Basically, one thing a lot of people have to understand is if you don't have a full knowledge of self and a knowledge of your history, your future is going to look very, very bleak. Okay, pertaining to that word and them not wanting people of African descent to use it is the same reason that you don't see African history in American history books that predate slavery. It's the same tactic. Okay, it's the same technique of mind control mental manipulation.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions on that because I see what you hitting on and I agree with you. Question number one is, why should we use it? Why do you feel we should still use the N-word?
The N-word in its European usage has no power. When I talk about that, I'm talking about what the European slave owners, how they referred to the word and the energy they had behind it. One thing we have to understand is an African brain that has European wiring per se, or that's been completely, brainwashed through the American education system. We need to understand that speaking their language is subconsciously telling us that the European way of life is right and just, okay? The metaphysics behind this and the science is really deep, and they've done studies. People that speak African languages by birth naturally are inclined to trust and to interact and to do business with other African people 85 to 90% more.
And to expound a little bit on what my brother's saying, with certain languages come certain energies and frequencies. For example, when you deal with the English language, there's a lot of loopholes. We talking about a new language. We talking about a language that come from a very evil culture. Some people refer to as the fire language. So what we talking about is when we say that the language is cursed, it's the fact that with the English language, the problem we face is a language that have the most synonyms than any other language. So if I say trust to my girlfriend, it means different as a financial person would say a trust. Or if I bond with my child, that's a different kind of bond that we see in finances. So with this English language, we see that because of it being the type language it is, it needs stuff like contracts.
Exactly.
And with those contracts, because there's so many loopholes in the language, you actually have to hire people to interpret the contract. And I mean, we all speak the same language. Why does these words mean different in this context, in a contract? So that's a little bit of what we're talking about the English language and how it is a curse.
This might blow you guys away. The English language was actually created by our ancestors, the Moors, to keep their creation, which was the first form of Caucasoid people on the planet. It was to keep them at a stagnant state with the English language and with religion, okay? Because like somebody else put it, okay, in a different way, the Caucasoid was originally made to be the complete opposite or shadow of the original African man, okay? This has been scientifically, genetically proven by scholars with PhDs, by scientists. The African person's melanin has something known as selenium in the middle of the melanin molecule, okay? Selenium is a superconductor of electricity. Caucasians on average have sulfur in the middle of their melanin, two different chemical compounds, which means that the first Europeans cannot naturally come from African people. I mean, it's really deep when you go into the science.
Now that brings a lot of questions that I'm going to ask you as well. So the first one would be, where did the first Europeans come from?
The first Caucasian person actually came to this earth through a form of grafting. I believe they call it grafting, genetic altering, genetic manipulation. Okay. Like I said in the very first video me and you made, Bro Sanchez, one of our ancient ancestors tried to duplicate, okay, what the Anunnaki did with the first Africans by creating the first Caucasoid. And by doing this, he actually broke some laws and commandments that they put down here in the Ark of the Covenant, okay? And the African race was hugely punished for that.
Now, my next question would be, and I agree with what you're saying, we talked about this plenty of times, but I just want to draw these questions because I think a lot of people listening would like to know some of this stuff. So my next question would be, we created the Caucasian race in so many words. That draws a lot of questions. If we created the Caucasian race, why did we create them? Which I think you already touched on, but I want you to go in a little bit more detail on them. And also, what's to come of this?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because on a deeper level, when you look at the Elohims and the Anunnaki, this is basically us, the whole human race, every single person on this planet, okay? We're going through something like a test. We could see this life as a test to see if we belong in this dimension or higher dimensions. And when you look at African African people as a whole across this planet. I might catch a lot of flack from this, but I'm going to say it anyway. White people, Yaqub was destined to create the white race, the Caucasian race, to test African people's faith in the Most High and the Creator, and vice versa. The Caucasians were put here, bodily souls from the universe were put in Caucasian bodies to test them whether they're going to follow their evil leaders' rule or they're going to stand up and go against the grain and stand up for justice and human equality all across the planet. It's a huge test to see if we belong in the third dimension or the higher dimensions, and it's no matter if you're white, black, brown, blue, yellow, green, or purple.
Okay, that's what's up right there. I got another question for you, my brother. I know you were going to move on to some more stuff, but the next question that I got for you is, when it comes to us creating a white race, about what time did we do this, and what was our technology at this time? Where was our science at? When you think about all of this, you think about the scientists and the stem cell research and the cloning going on today. We know that African people were the first to do everything. So I look at it the same way. This is the ancient version of what we see in today's world with the tampering of DNA and everything like that. Now, everybody has a lot of theories of how the Caucasian race come about. And we're not preaching any racism here. We're just trying to get to some facts. Now, there's a lot of theories. I want you to expound on a few of them and go more into detail on this, because this can go a lot of ways, you know.
Going back to the English language, okay, like I said, our ancestors, the Moors, actually created that language as a cursed language, okay, to draw up the total opposite of energy that will come from the higher dimensions.
Let me cut into that, because we all gonna get some knowledge out of this and some understanding. So at the time of our ancestors doing this, our Moorish ancestors doing this, what type of moral condition were we in at this time? Where was our spirituality? Were we good people or were we evil people doing these practices?
That's the perfect question. And at this time, the Moors were in a state of grief, and they had a whole bunch of vengeance, and their heart was full of nothing but vengefulness, okay? And this is really gonna blow you guys away. Not only did the Moors create the English cursed language to keep the Caucasoids down, but the Moors, this is gonna blow a lot of people away, the Moors created AIDS and created the Black Plague to wipe the white race out. And it happened during the Dark Ages in Europe, when over 13 million Caucasoids were killed in Europe. And this was all about population control, population reduction.
Now, a lot of people gonna have something to say about that when you say that AIDS existed during this time, because even my understanding, I thought that AIDS was a new thing that exists only in today's time.
There was a couple of great master teachers that, proclaimed this knowledge before me. So, it's really deep. With my understanding, the AIDS virus actually started with the first major homosexual acts, starting with the Vatican when they caused Egypt to fall. Okay, the first Pope, Pope Sylvester, was actually cursed by the Elohims with an unknown virus. Okay, and this unknown virus is actually what is perceived as and identified as AIDS today. AIDS was actually put here by the Elohims to punish people who went against nature. When you look at the word Ebola and you spell it backwards, it's a low being, a person on low vibrations who's operating on low vibrations across the planet. So you are going to be more prone to catching these wicked viruses if you're going against nature.
That does make a lot of sense, and it is a lot of reality to support that. And I also want to bring up something. When we say that the Elohim created AIDS, everybody that research AIDS says that the virus was created in a laboratory. Also, to get you to touch on that, because the deep thing about when we say that the Elohim created AIDS, now we're saying like the biblical God cursed and punished people in the Bible. So the same concept even in the Egyptian gods, but that can be argued. I do agree with a lot of it. But what I'm saying is, if the Elohim created AIDS, that lets the European off the hook. That lets him off the hook, because a lot of people know that Europeans had a lot to do with a lot of viruses that we see in the laboratory. And it kind of lets them off the hook when we say that the Elohim did it. So what you have to say about that?
I'm glad you said that as well, because when the virus got to Fort Detrick, Maryland in the early 70s, I believe, the Europeans actually took the virus and altered it to where it would only be attached to the African genome and the African phenotype. At first, it was only attached to the Caucasoid phenotype because viruses, like I said in previous lectures, are not bacteria. A bacteria is a microscopic organism that has been living on this planet since its existence and is extremely sensitive to temperature change. A virus is a microscopic capsule. It's a microscopic artificial capsule that can be created. Actually, all viruses are created, and they are capable of being altered to what kind of genome that they are attracted to.